What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today I've got 3 more I Do Work Here Lady stories which you're gonna love. Karen thought I wasn't qualified to answer her question. This one's from a few years ago. I just found the shirt in my closet and it reminded me. I worked in concessions at a zoo for a while. We were bringing in traveling exhibits during the summer to boost attendance. This one summer, we couldn't get the wildly popular animatronic dinosaurs exhibit. So instead, we got a maze with interactive displays to teach children about the daily lives of chimpanzees. Ticket proceeds benefited a certain well-known primatologist charitable foundation. Note, the maze was placed in an open area near our narrow gauge train station, not anywhere near the chimp exhibit. For promotional purposes, the foundation gave all of the employees t-shirts with the name of the maze on. Unfortunately, the shirts did not say the name of the zoo anywhere on them, so guests were constantly assuming we worked for the maze. To make matters worse, the closest food stand to the maze was a prefab cart selling a popular pelletized frozen treat, with an alliterated name, covered in their logo and looking every bit like a franchise cart, and not like we owned and staffed it ourselves. It was right next to the maze, so naturally we fielded many complaints and had many people try to buy maze tickets from us. The actual ticket booth was right on the other side of the maze entrance, but Karens don't care. Enter me, wearing my maze t-shirt and working in the frozen treat cart. This lady walks up and starts complaining. "Where are the chimps? I don't see any in the maze." "They're down that way around the corner past the penguins," I reply. "No, they're not," she replied. "This is the chimpanzee maze. They're supposed to be chimps here." "No, Mom," I said. "This is an educational maze. If you want to see chimps, they're down that way." "How would you know? You don't work for the zoo." Yes, she literally told me that. I'm not kidding. "Yes, I do, Mom." "No, your shirt doesn't say zoo on it. I want you to find me someone who can help me." "Mom, I actually am a zoo employee. The zoo's parent organization operates everything here." She still wouldn't accept that I was an employee, but fortunately, the ticket taker at the maze was wearing the regular zoo polo, and I was able to wave her over to help. One of the first things she said was, "Yeah, that's OP. He works here." Believe it or not, this wasn't the only time I had this interaction. After a few shifts in that cart, I stopped wearing the t-shirt and went back to wearing my polo that did have our logo on it. Admissions ended up lowering the price of the maze tickets to $1 because so many people complained about there not being chimps in the maze. The next summer, we brought back the animatronic dinosaurs. You know what, I kinda understand what Karen is saying in this situation, but then when you say that you do work here and your colleague confirms it, she should have been a little bit more appreciative of your situation. It is a little bit strange though that your uniform didn't have the zoo logo or employee on it or something like that, just to help people understand it. I mean, you said it yourself in the post, this wasn't the only time you had this interaction. Maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know, I think it's a little bit harsh to label this woman as a Karen personally. Now for our next story. Some people need to feel important. I work for Burger King as a delivery driver. Our restaurant is located in a campus food court. The food court closes at 8 p.m. and guests have to leave by 8:30 p.m. I finished the last delivery of the day and park the car in the parking spaces of the food court. I take everything from the car and head for the staff door. I have my uniform on me, which is a black jacket with a Burger King logo and delivery written above it. Mine is slightly worn already, but the BK logo is still clearly visible. As I go for the elevator, a security guard I haven't seen before exits one of the elevators, laptop and LAN cable in his arms. He was returning from his locking routine. I greet him politely. He greets me back. As I go past him, he stops me. "Where do you think you're going?" "The elevator takes you to the corridor that connects all the different restaurants." "To Burger King," I reply simply. He shakes his head. "They are already closed." I was shocked, to be honest. "I know," I replied. "I work there." "Could you prove it?" he said, slightly annoyed. I don't know what his deal was. I pointed at the big circular logo on my jacket. "I'm a delivery guy. My shift is just about over and I'm going to return all this stuff," I said and walked in the elevator. He looked defeated and watched me as the elevator doors closed. This was the first and hopefully the last time I had problems with security here. Okay, I'm more like 50-50 on this story. I mean, you could say that this security guard was just doing his job, right? I mean, he was only asking where you were going. But then you could also argue that he was kind of exercising his authority for no real reason. I mean, you were wearing a uniform, you didn't pose any threat, and it was quite obvious what you were doing. Especially given that you said, "I'm a delivery person for Burger King," right? I don't know, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think about this one. Did the security guard pushed too much, or was he just doing his job? Now for our third story. I'm not a student, I'm staff. This happened so many years ago, back in 1985. I was working as a volunteer at a residential school before going to university. I was 18 at the time. I had a year placement at a lovely school in a very picturesque part of England. It was a school for boys aged 5 to 11 with emotional and behavioural difficulties. They were described as maladjusted at the time. I arrived at the school in late November and had only been there for a few weeks when the owner of the place, a world-renowned psychologist, asked me if I'd like to transfer to his new school about 60 miles away. The new school would be opening in the new year, but he was getting the staff in place now, ready for January. The idea was for the staff to start at the school in early January, go through some training, and get everything ready for the first group of students and residents to start in February. It sounded like an exciting project, so I said I'd love to. After Christmas, I arrived at the new school. Well, actually, I arrived at a tiny country railway station. There was no phone, I was a decade or two too early for a mobile phone, and the person from the school didn't show up. I had to walk for 2 miles, struggling with my cases, to find a phone box. I finally managed to get through to the school, and within half an hour, I was safely ensconced in the staff accommodation. Those first few weeks were fantastic. That old joke about schools being a great place to work if it wasn't for the pupils is absolutely true. The school was made up of a very fine old manor house built sometime in the 18th century, an ultra-modern school building, complete with library and gym, and a 5-bedroom cottage for staff accommodation, all set in a few acres on the banks of a river. It was really beautiful. February rolled up and we got the first intake of students. The school was mainly set up as somewhere for the older students from the original primary school to go when they reached secondary school age, aged 11, although it also had students placed from all over the country. That first intake of students gave us a grand total of 6 members of staff on each shift team and 6 students. It made for the perfect pupil to staff ratio. We worked intensive shifts, 3.5 days on duty and 3.5 days off. It was great having those long weekends, but being on duty was pretty exhausting. We started our days at 7 a.m, getting the boys up, washed, dressed and breakfasted. At 8:50 we handed off to the teaching staff and the boys went off to the school building. We care workers had a brief meeting and did any paperwork or anything else that needed to be done, and usually by 11 a.m. we would be finished until 3 p.m, when the teachers handed over custody of the boys back to us. There was a brief handover meeting with teachers and senior care workers while we juniors supervised the boys having a light tea and then getting them changed ready for that afternoon/evening activities. We'd have dinner at about 6 p.m. and then have quiet activities until 9 o'clock when the boys went up to the dorms. Lights out at 10 o'clock, and after that 2 members of staff stayed on call overnight. Although I was working on the care side, I also worked in the school. I wanted to get as much experience as possible. I was considering becoming a teacher. I would help out as a classroom assistant, supervise break times, and because I was the only member of staff with any knowledge of computers, worked with small groups on the BBC micros in the library. Sometime in mid-March, the owner, the psychologist, let us know we were going to be inspected by Her Majesty's Inspectors of Education. They were going to inspect both the teaching side and the care side. The whole school was a little worried about this because we'd not been running long and were still perfecting our policies and routines. On the day of the inspection, I was working on the teaching side. There were 2 inspectors, but by lunchtime break they hadn't made it into the school building, so I hadn't seen them. While I was supervising the boys' playtime, I spotted a man in a suit, obviously one of the inspectors. He was just sort of standing there, looking at the scenery and looking a little uncomfortable. Probably someone who was great going through the books, but not great with kids. I should remind you I was only 18, but I was an old 18. By the age of 14, I was around 6 foot and could pass for 18. In fact, when I was 14, my social studies class had a field trip to the local magistrates court. We spent the morning watching the magistrate fine people for parking and speeding offences, and then, at lunchtime, we left the court and the teacher told us to make our own way back to school. Now, my friend Davey, who was also tall like me, and I decided we'd stop off at the pub on the way back. We were in school uniform, but that was black trousers, a white long sleeve shirt, tie and blazer. Our blazers had the school shield on the pocket and the tie was our school tie, so we just took off the ties and slung our blazers over our shoulders and walked into a pub. We looked like office workers. We ordered 2 pints of lager and the barman didn't look twice, just gave us our drinks. So fast forward 4 years, I certainly looked 18. Anyway, I went over to the inspector and just said, "Looks beautiful, doesn't it?" We had a bit of a conversation. He asked me some questions about what we did for leisure during the evenings and weekends and things like that. The bell rang and school started again and I told him I had to get back to class. He just said something like, "Okay, nice talking to you." I went back to school and had an interesting time. Stevie, a 12-year-old with significant temper issues, had a full-on temper tantrum and I spent most of the afternoon on my own with the class while Debs, the teacher, dealt with Stevie. At 3 p.m, we went back to the main house to hand back to the care workers. I wasn't on care duty, so after tea, I was on my way back to the cottage, but was stopped by Roger, the head of the school. He told me that the inspection went a little shakily. It looked as if we were going to get a good rating instead of the excellent rating we wanted. But after lunch, one of the inspectors came back to the office saying how impressed he was with the students. He'd had a long conversation with one of the older boys and was amazed at how polite and knowledgeable he was. So, as this was the first inspection and we were so new, they were a little more lenient and gave us the excellent rating. The inspectors were leaving as school finished and we were coming back to the main house. And Roger asked the inspector to point out the student he was impressed with. You guessed it was me. Roger didn't correct him and I never got the chance to say, I do work here. Wow, I think this might be the first story where it's a good thing to not say I do work here. That is awesome that your professionalism more than likely secured that excellent rating. Well done. Can you imagine if Roger had actually said, oh wait, him? He's actually a teacher here. What? That literally could have seen your rating go down from excellent to good, or maybe even worse, just because the guy would have been really embarrassed. But yeah, overall, dude, fair play. You're clearly a good guy and you did well for your school. Anyway, that is going to be the end of this episode of r/I Do Work Here Lady. I really hope you have enjoyed it. If you did and you want more immediately, check out the playlist on screen right now. Also, drop a like on this video, comment your opinions down below, and make sure you're subscribed to catch tomorrow's upload at the same time, same place.